Hey everyone, welcome back to another painting tutorial. As always, my name is Jay, and in this video I want to show you a quick way to speed paint your Deathwing Terminators. It's a fun way using primarily contrast paints, and I'm going to show you two different levels of painting, and you can choose whichever one. So I start off with the model entirely primed black, and then from a 45-degree angle I hit it with a light gray primer. I used StanoRes for both the black, and I used a 1-to-1 mix of white and black primer from StanoRes at a 45-degree angle. And now it's time to start using those amazing contrast paints. So that's what we're going to do. So I started off with Skeleton Horde because that is, of course, the main bone color of the armor. So, of course, we wanted to start by painting all the armor and the paper, the purity seals, Skeleton Horde. Now, I did thin it down just slightly. I used about a 4-to-1 mix of Skeleton Horde to contrast medium. I just wanted to thin it down slightly so it didn't come off too dark. And now it's ultimately up to you. And as you can see here, I'm just painting this basically in real time. The key is once you start a section, make sure you cover the entire section before moving on to the next area, because you don't want it to dry weirdly. And also, if you notice it's really pooling after putting it on, what I'd recommend doing is drying off your brush and then just, taking off some of the excess with your brush, and that way it doesn't build up too much in a specific area. But there you go. As you can see, I'm just taking my time and painting the bone armor, and it's ultimately up to you if you want to stay here at the bone armor with just Skeleton Horde, but I want to do some quick dry brushes. Most people recommend when you're doing a slap chop method to do a highlight beforehand, and I'm doing it afterwards, and you're going to see why. The reason being, of course, is that we're going to be highlighting with a couple light bone colors, and that acts as the highlight color, so you don't really need to do it before that. So as you can see, just covering the whole model with Skeleton Horde, taking my time, make sure to get all the areas, but that's the majority of the color, and this actually takes up the most time. And here's what the model looks like when it was completely dry. And as I said, you can stop here if you want, but I want to do a couple quick dry brushes. As I said, the goal is to speed paint this miniature, so dry brushes are by far the best method. You can do it really quickly and effectively. So first I'm going to do a dry brush with a Shabti bone, focusing on the raised areas, so the areas that are facing upwards. And it's very easy to tell because of the way that we did the zenithal base of the model. It's really easy to tell based on, the color, what areas you're supposed to focus on. So I'm using the top of the knees, the top of the arms, top of the body, the face especially. I really want to draw the attention to the face and the upper chest of the model, as well as the shoulder pads. So as you can see, I'm just going to constantly load my brush, wipe off the excess, and just do a quick dry brush of Shabti bone. I see I just really want to pick up and pick up on the edges and the raised surfaces of this model and really make it pop. It's very easy to get the armor done and really solid, and then we can go from there. And as you see, because when you get the foundation of the model, in this case the bone armor, done really quickly and effectively, it makes things a whole lot easier. Now I'm just going to do the same thing with Screaming Skull, and I'm just going to really focus on the face, a light dry brush on the face, the very top of the armor, the chest and the shoulder pads and the hands, just the parts I really want to draw the attention to. But as you can see, it's looking great. After a few minutes, this is only like 3 or 4 minutes into the model, and the armor is going to be basically done. And that's it for the armor. It's looking good, and we're speed painting away. Now I'm going to start with the reds. And so with the reds, I'm going to use Blood Angel Red, of course, the contrast color. I'm going to use contrast for pretty much the entire model other than the metallics. I don't want to do non-metallics. I like true metallics. So I'm going to use Blood Angel's Red. And for this one, I actually didn't thin it down at all. I used it directly out of my paint pot and put it on the model. It has such great pigment to it. It's very bright and vibrant. I love using it. And as I said, I just took my time, painted the eyes, the purity seals, and the any of the symbols on the body. Like usually with a Deathwing, they have it on a shoulder pad. This is the one of the guys from the Leviathan starter set. It's okay. And I'm going to paint the gun as well using Blood Angel's Red. I just take my time, make sure that I got it well, and don't accidentally bleed into areas it's not supposed to. But as you can see, after a single coat, it just has such great pigmentation to it, and it just goes on so nice and smooth, especially over this, the bone tones that we built up originally. If going over that, it's easy because it creates a warm texture anyway, so going red over it is nice and easy. The great thing about these models is there's not a lot of colors that you have to go with, so it's a very easy model to use contrast paints. I love contrast paints, as you're going to see in this tutorial. I just love to use them, especially because it's basically a base coat and a wash in one, and they do dry pretty quickly as well. And that's basically it for the Dark Angels, sorry, the Blood Angels Red. And now, of course, we go to the greens, the black. For the gaps in the armor, I use Black Templar. Once again, it's a very great color to use because it just goes into the recesses and allows the raised areas already go up a little bit lighter in tones. So I don't even highlight after that. I just use Black Templar straight out of the pot, put it onto the model, and it's good to go, and it creates that definition to begin with all the rippled areas in the gaps in the armor. This is a perfect color for that. Once again, if you're speed painting a bunch of miniatures at the same time, this is a huge time saver. Just getting all the gaps in the armor, and as well on the gaps in the armor on the hands and stuff. The chest symbol is going to be Dark Angels Green. Now, Dark Angels Green is a very dark contrast color. So what I did with this one is I did about a 2-to-1 mix of Dark Angels Green and contrast medium. And that way, it actually allows the Dark Angels Green to get into the recesses, but allows the raised areas to be a much brighter green. I find that if you do it straight from the pot with no thinner, it actually goes on really dark and just tends to cloud a little bit of the details. Obviously, we don't want that because we're trying to speed paint, so we want it to go on nice and smooth and have the raised areas be a different color. So, once the Dark Angels Green is all done, as I said, I'm just finishing up the symbol on the chest here. We're actually, as you can see, we're almost done the model. It's actually really nice and clean to do. So now it's time to do the metallics. Now, I like to do true metallics. So I'm going to start with Lead Belcher. Once again, you can use like an Administratum Gray if you want to do non-metallics. I like the look of true metallics, and it's not very hard to do. It covers extremely well, especially over the colors that we've done. So Lead Belcher is the way to go. As you can see, I just do it directly from the paint pot. I put it on a palette, and I use it from there. But it covers extremely well. I don't need to thin it down. Looks good, and it covers great. So I'm just going to paint all the remaining symbols, the gun, the part of his helmet, and just go from there. As you can see, so far I've only been spending about 15 minutes plus drying time on the model already. Not too much when you're painting a Terminator, and it's even easier if you're batch painting, as you just go one to the next, the next, the next, the next, and it's a huge time saver. Actually, at this point, I think I've spent like 13 minutes on the model, and it's looking decent. As I said, the goal is to get it to a tabletop standard and go from there. That way you can get in a tournament, get it on the tabletop, and have some fun. As you can see, just painting still the metallics with Lead Belcher. And then, after that's done, I painted the one symbol on the gun with Brass Scorpion. I like the red tone to Brass Scorpion. I like it because it's a warm tone, and it's a great one to paint if you're going to paint a single color on the gun. And so, now we've painted the Brass Scorpion. You can theoretically stop here if you want. This is level 1, and as you can see, looks good. It's a speed painted model. You've painted in less than 15 minutes of total time. You can get this on the tabletop, and it's a tabletop standard. More than 3 color minimum. You can definitely play it in a tournament. But I also want to show you the next step on how to take it to the next level if you want. So once again, you can stop here if you want, or you can keep going and add more detail to the model using an enhanced slap chop method. So that's level 1. Now it's time to take it to level 2. I'm going to do a non-oil shade, and I hate shading using the shading paints when I'm speed painting because they take a long time to dry. So this is great if you're batch painting miniatures, and that's why I'm starting with a non-oil shade. Since I'm only painting a single miniature, I want to start off with the single shade because I'm only using one. And while it's drying, I am literally going to paint the rest of the highlights on the model before this non-oil even dries. So while it's drying, I'm going to multitask and finish painting the model because the goal is to get it on the tabletop quickly and nicely, as you can see. So I'm just doing a non-oil shade on all the silver areas of the model. And this is going to be my single shade that I'm going to use in this entire painting tutorial. And as I mentioned, while it's drying, now it's time to highlight the rest of the areas. So for the gold, I use Gehenna's gold. Once again, a warm gold, and I just focused on the raised parts of the symbol. And that's all the golds. That's really easy. And now what I do, and what I recommend doing with the slapshot method, is I like to use intermediate highlights. So normally I would do Evil Sunz Scarlet as the first highlight and Wild Rider Red as the second highlight. Instead here, what I did is a 1-to-1 mix of Evil Sunz Scarlet and Wild Rider Red, and that way it's an intermediate highlight color. And what I did was an edge highlight. So with the eyes, I just did the very center part of the eye. On the gun, I'm going to do a nice edge highlight, and I just focus on the raised areas of all, the higher up areas on all the symbols. And that's it. And once again, I thin it down with a little bit of Lamium Medium as well, so it flows nicely. I use a wet palette, and that way it keeps. And once again, this is a very easy step to do if you're going to be painting a lot of models. But as you can see, I'm just doing a quick edge highlight of the gun, and just on the raised and the higher areas of each part that's red. And it creates a nice intermediate highlight that will blend really easily with the Blood Angels Red that we used originally. And if you ever need a reference point, the contrast paints really do speak to you anyway, and you can just look at them and really kind of detect what the raised surfaces and where to highlight, because you can see it really nicely using these contrast paints. And then once again for the greens, I used a 1-to-1 mix of Warpstone Glow and Moot Green, thinned down with a little Lamium Medium. And then once again, I focused on all the raised parts of the chest piece. I just did a quick, basically an over. After doing the top part and the skull, I just basically do a quick overbrush by using a little bit of paint on my brush and going over it, and that way just picking up on the raised surfaces of the chest symbol. And once again, the non-oil is still even drying, and we're already well into the highlights of this model. As you can see, I'm basically going backwards with my highlights, but that's cool. There we go. Another color done. And now it's to, I just took a little bit of white scars on my detail brush, and I just did the very tip of the eye, just to put a little reflection in the eye. Just adds a little details like that really make the model pop. It's quick, it's very easy to do, just takes a little bit of practice, but it takes your model to the next level and adds a little bit of a reflection, just makes it look awesome. And while it's even drying, I just took some astrogranite debris, and I painted most of the base with it, and that way I could just do a quick dry brush using a light color. I like to use a warm color afterwards on astrogranite debris, like Screaming Skull, after it dries, and I'm going to put a little bit of grass flock on it as well. But once again, this is all while the non-oil is drying. It's a very quick way to speed paint your miniatures and get them on the tabletop as quickly as possible. And for that skull on the base, I use the same thing. I basically did the same thing I did with the armor with the skull. And then finally, I took some Iron Breaker, focused on the raised surfaces in the areas facing upwards, and just did a quick highlight of the metallics once the non-oil was dry. But it's easy, and the model is basically done as we saw here. This is my final color of this entire tutorial, and it's a very easy amount of time. I only spent about 22 minutes on this model total, plus drying time, and it is done, and it's ready for the tabletop and looking awesome. But once again, as you can see here, I'm just focusing on the raised areas and just the parts that I really want to pop with the silver. And that is basically it. And this is what the model looks like when it's completed. As you can see, it's taken to level 2, and it's so easy to paint. You can stop at level 1, but it doesn't take very long to speed paint this miniature using contrast paints and a few highlights. It's a great tabletop standard that you can easily put this model on any tournament tabletop, and it will get full painting score. And it's a fun model to paint up. This is Space Marines. It has some great detail, and in the end, looks good for the amount of time spent on it. Yes. So I really hope you enjoyed this painting tutorial. Please like the video, comment in the comment section down below, and subscribe to my channel if you already haven't done so. Until next time, this is Jay saying, happy painting, everyone.